Whatever your objective, successful people create a framework around their day to day lives that enhance their lives, and sometimes they pour into others. This podcast will reveal the story of a hero, a sports superstar, a person that gave to others without thinking of himself. Today, we will be sharing the story of such a hero, sports legend Roberto Clemente. To tell the story, I have a very special guest that will be sharing the story of his hero and how this hero impacted his life. Our guest is a very successful entrepreneur. He is a philanthropist and now first time film producer. And I'm proud to say he's a personal friend. For our listeners and for our viewers as well, we'll be sharing an open and personal conversation with film producer and philanthropist Steve Burman. Our guest will share the story as to why the story of Roberto Clemente needs to be told and why we're telling it now. You will also learn why so many people of our era, when they hear the name Roberto Clemente, without skipping a beat, they attach hero to such a sports legend. And if you hang around long enough, we'll talk about the connection between why LeBron James and his people are attaching themselves to this film project that will be released May 18th here on the East Coast. We'll tell you more about that. So, without saying, I want to introduce my guest, Steve Burman. He is a retired entrepreneur. He has dedicated his time to his family, maintaining his fitness, and preserving and memorializing sports icons through the art of sports. And now he's adding film to his name. So, ladies and gentlemen, this show is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Through the power of our story, our mission is to uplift through your voice, inspire, share stories and experiences, perspectives, and using the framework of teaching and learning and modeling. Our purpose is hope. I just want to welcome my good friend, Steve Burman, to the show. How you doing, Steve?
Good. How you doing, Kevin? Good to see you.
Good to see you, and thank you for taking the time. I see that you're wearing the number 21,
Yeah,
Joel Clemente's number, and
yeah,
amazing individual, a
yeah.
talent lost way too soon. He did great things, and we'll be talking about some of the stories and some of the things and the way he impacted, the way he brought people together of all colors, all races, through his gift. He is one of the most consistent Major League Baseball players throughout our time. And you happen to own some of his personal memorabilia. But before we do a deep dive into why, there's now going to be a film release or documentary telling his story. Let the audience know a little bit about Steve Burman. Tell us about you, sir.
Um, I am a baseball fanatic. As a child, I played, collected cards as a child, and through my adult life, played baseball. My father was had a big influence on me as far as he was a huge Roberto Clemente fan, and so at a very young age, 10 or 12, I was a big fan of Clemente. And he passed away when I was 12, 1972, December 31st, New Year's Eve. And it made a huge impression on me, the way that he died, uh, delivering supplies to Nicaragua, which had just suffered a massive earthquake in Managua, which he loved Managua. He had been played there and loved the town. But that's the beginning of my love for Clemente.
Well, for those people that are young, and I have a lot of young listeners, we know that the 60s and 70s in this country, race relationships weren't great. It was
Yeah.
tougher on some of the sports legends that happened to enter the league. And throughout their accomplishments, people such as Willie Mays, Hank
Mhm.
Aaron, which I have had the privilege to meet, Satchel Paige, Roberto Clemente brought together the community of Black and Brown people, but also the world. And still to this day, when we call his name, people that love the sport, love the game, when you hear the name Clemente, when you toss a ball speeding across the home plate and you swing and you miss, which he very seldom did, they say hero. As a child growing up, first time you saw Roberto Clemente play, tell us about that experience. And I know, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, you're a baseball player even to today. You've won some awards. But tell me, when you sat up there, you dug your feet into the dirt, did your little dance around home plate, put the bat over your shoulders, and you had visions of Roberto Clemente, one of the most consistent 300 hitters in Major League Baseball. What were you thinking when you were swinging the bat?
Well, Clemente wasn't very selective with his pitches, and I was never very selective. If I saw something straight coming at me and I could see it, I would swing at it. And I had a good arm. Clemente's very known for his incredible throwing arm, um, which we try to depict in the movie. The the videos are were difficult to come by back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Not like today, making a documentary on Tom Brady where there's so much video. So,
You live in Philadelphia and you brought up Tom Brady's name in your interview. Shame.
yeah, I'm not, I'm an Eagles fan. So,
All
but
right.
he gets a lot of publicity, so, but, I, I just, you know, when I read about Clemente. I have a book from 1973, right after he died, and he made a statement in there. I'm going to not get it exactly right, but it basically said, if someone asks you for help and you don't help them, you are wasting your time on this earth. And that really, as a 12-year-old, maybe wasn't the most eloquent way of saying it, but it made perfect sense to me. And it's now becoming a popular quote from him. And I really have tried to live by, I saw my parents helping people, my grandfather, you know, uh, helping people. And it's really been, Clemente kind of solidified that. And, uh, and I've lived my life like that. And, to help people. And it's, um, it's worked out well. God's given me the opportunity to help a lot of people um, through my businesses and stuff. And but that's really the point where as a kid, I was like, you don't want to waste your time on this earth. Like that's seemed so ridiculous. So I've always lived by that. I've and that's really a very important part of my childhood.
Well, you know something. I'm glad you paid attention to your childhood. You'll find out at the end of the show that my grandfather passed on a quote to me that I live and die by. You're by far one of the kindest, most gentlest people. I've known you for almost 7 years through
Mm.
association with fitness. You happen to be associated with one of the premier fitness professionals at Lifetime, Aubrey, which is an outstanding trainer. You have the best of the best. I stand in her shadows every single day. But no one knowing you would know that you are a freelance philanthropist, if I can say it that way.
Yeah.
No one would know as you're as kind and gentle and as approachable as you are, even though you've had five businesses that you have created and sold. You're by far one of the most humble and kindest people I've ever met in my life.
Oh, thank you.
And when I heard and got the invitation to come to the premiere screening of this movie, I I didn't know you were a baseball fan at the level that I now know of you. You're
Yeah,
a collector. I saw an email that you had written to the Clemente family.
yeah,
You own his National League 1967 National League batting champion trophy. I believe I've got
yes,
that right. You also own one of his rings. You also
yes,
own his probably the last uniform he wore,
yes,
his road uniform, 1972.
yep,
There's a different uniform worn for home games
right.
and ones that they wear on the road. I don't know if many people know that. I had the
Yeah.
privilege of being associated with the Cleveland Indians for quite some time, via through Julio Franco as his trainer and conditioning coach. You're a collector. Tell us about your collection before we dive into the movie.
Um, like I said, I've always been a collector. I had my cards as a kid, and I started collecting uh, Clemente cards, which are pricey. So, but they continue to go up in value. So, but I was fortunate that the Clemente family in 2015 decided to put up most of Roberto's memorabilia um, for auction through Hunt's auction in Westchester. But it was a national auction, and I was very fortunate to get three pieces through that auction. It was my first auction ever, so it was um, I didn't know what I was doing actually, but and I got his silver bat. I have his 1960 World Series ring, and the uniform that you mentioned. It's a road uniform from 1972, and their last game was in Cincinnati. Um, so he wore that road jersey. Um, it's a little faded now, but usually the road jerseys are a little darker. They were, but they're prized possessions, and I pick up one of his bats along the way. Um, and I have a hat, which was
I
right
see they're
there.
back there.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh Pirates. All right.
yeah, yep. He's 6 3/4 was a um he didn't have a really big head, but but yeah, so I'm really fortunate to have pieces around the house. And the the way that I really got started with the movie was I when I won the auction, I wanted to I didn't want to just hoard these things and put them away. I contacted the Clemente Museum in Pittsburgh and donated or lend items to them, which right now they have the 72 jersey, and I also have his glove. I have his glove from 1967 or 68. They're out there right now, and they're going to be we have a friends and family showing of the movie on May 18th, and we'll have some of those pieces out there you can touch and hold because I want to share everything about him.
All right. I'm going to ask you about the March 18th movie, but you brought up the fact that you have his glove. Let
Yeah,
me ask you a question. When you bought his glove,
yeah,
you put your hands inside the glove and
yeah,
experience what he experienced every single time he hit the plate.
yeah.
All
Ah,
right.
it's
What was that like?
incredible. It's incredible. I mean, his hat is his. I have one of his bats. But the glove was really special because he had, probably used it the entire year. So his hand was in there a lot, and I want to go out and play with it, but uh, it's really 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 fortunate to be able to have some of these pieces and be able to share them. Um, the Clemente Museum is an incredible place, and you're going to meet some of the Clemente museums coming in from Pittsburgh. Dwayne Ryder is the head guy there, and he's going to be part of the presentation talking about Clemente. So,
Yeah, I want to speak to my listeners, especially my young listeners that, that are falling in love with baseball. I know here in Philadelphia, we have a season-ending love-hate relationship with the Philadelphia Phillies in baseball. The last couple of years, we have been contention for the World Series, but Roberto Clemente, he was the first Latin American
yes,
to have 3,000 career hits before his
right.
death in a plane crash in December 31, 1972. And you said you had your hands in this. So for those of us that are not going to get a chance to go to the Friends and Family premiere, what should we expect to see from this documentary? And I know that we're looking for distribution for this film, so hopefully it'll end up on our either the big screen or small screens in our home.
Right.
Give us some idea of going through the process. Did we hire actors to be Mr.
No,
Clemente?
we have Richard Linklater. He's in the movie talking about he did Hallow Shao and School of Rock. He's the producer for those movies. But
That's big time.
he originally was in the movie because he sent Clemente a picture when he was 10 or 11 years old from Houston. And you would send pictures in the team and ask him to sign. Nobody ever signed him. I mean, and nobody, superstars would sign them usually. And he got it back for best wishes, Roberto Clemente. That's the kind of stories that you're going to hear in the personal stories are to me mean the most. I mean, there's Michael Keaton's in the film, Rita Moreno to talk about um, the Puerto Rico and the difficulties coming to the United States. And Roberto, there's a portion about. I mean, he referred to himself as I hope I can say this as
You can say it.
a double knicker. That's what he referred to himself through his son because he not only was black, um, he was Puerto Rican. He was a black Puerto Rican. He couldn't speak the language, so he had trouble. Black people didn't really even accept him because he wasn't really black, and to white people, he was black. So um, that's what his son Roberto, who will be on, hopefully be there next week, said that's what he referred to himself, and that's why he became such a wonderful spokesman because he knew that he had to be really on his game and very professional. He wasn't one of these guys that went out to dive bars and stuff. Um, because he knew that someday there's going to be a lot of Latin American players that are going to play in the major leagues. And at the time, there was less than 5% of players were from Latin America, and now it's over 30%. So
Yeah.
um, other people, Lindor's in the movie from the Mets. He's Puerto Rican, and there's a few others, but the stories to me that mean the most to the local Pittsburgh people that had touches with his greatness. There's a segment about this woman Carol Bass. She's from Philadelphia. She's going to be there on the 18th. She was outside of Connie Mack Stadium where the Phillies played until 1970 with their father. We used to hang out, try to get autographs. Players would walk right out there. He missed the bus to the airport because Clemente missed the bus to the airport because he was signing so many autographs. And she ran and got her father to give him a ride to the airport, and they talked along the way, exchanged numbers, and she still has the number that he wrote to contact him. They became lifelong friends, and she was actually at his house on New Year's Eve 1972 when his plane went down because the families had become so close. So, stuff like that is like you don't see that from your average player,
No, you're
let
exactly
alone
right.
your
And
average human.
yeah, and people fail to realize that. And I just had Villanova superstar Alvin Williams
Oh yeah.
recently on one of my podcasts. And one of the things that I know from coming up, I grew up in the same era that you did. And when you talk about Hank Aaron, you talk about Willie Mays, you talk about Satchel Paige, and all the people that came up, both Latin Americans and Black Americans, playing the game to be an American and playing an American pastime is one, you play a game that you love, you get up there, you perform, and you have teammates that wish you weren't in that position, but because your talent awarded you that position. And until long after your death or the game is gone, we celebrate your accolades, your achievements, but we forget the way that, how many times you came up to bat and you were booed and you were called names and whatever.
Mm.
And the whole thing with race relations, which I'm hoping that one day we find the ties that bind, is finding a way to be accepted, to be part
Mhm.
of this great country we call America. And so when you hear people coming from other countries that don't speak the language, um, we struggle with identifying or finding empathy within that conversation and having patience, allowing them to learn. Roberto Clemente died in 1972, going back to Nicaragua to help earthquake victims to bring relief. And
Right.
from what I remember of the story, now I was young too. I entered my freshman year of high school in 1973. So in 1972, I was still in the eighth grade. That he was supposed to be on a plane with one of his teammates.
Yeah.
And because he says it was New Year's Eve,
Yep.
he had asked his teammate to stay and be with his family. And
Yep.
I also know that when he perished, one of his teammates spent weeks. He was probably one of the very few people that attended his funeral because he was diving, and still to this day they had not recovered
That
his
was
body.
Manny Sanguian. It
Yep,
was super, super great guy.
yep, right. So Latin Americans, Black Americans, and Americans itself made this game great.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to see that the racial barriers amongst the same in the uniform has lessened. I don't think it's ever going to go away, but I'm happy to see that people such as yourself are telling the story that needs to be told of these
Yeah.
individuals. And so, again, tell us about the Friends and Family, the debut of this movie, and the title of the movie, where it's going to be seen, what time Friends and Family need to be there, and what to expect from the movie.
It's going to be May 18th. It's at 4 o'clock. Doors open at 3. It's at the Media Theater in uh, Media, Pennsylvania, which is a 100-year-old theater, which doesn't really do movies anymore. They do mostly plays and stuff, but we got it set up to do a movie. And what to expect is just a great, heartwarming story. You're going to see the Clemente's sons a lot in the movie. His wife, who passed away uh, shortly after we taped her, um, she passed away 4 or 5 years ago. It took a long time to make the movie because of the pandemic and so forth. But you're going to see greatness, and you're going to see a person that loved all. He talks about it, all human beings. I mean,
He loved people. He loved
yeah.
people.
Right now, I mean, I'm a Jewish American, and really struggling right now with some of the current events and some of the anti-Semitism. So, um, growing up as a Jew, I never could be prejudiced against anybody else because I knew that people were prejudiced against Jews. So I don't get it. I don't really understand it. I'm sad about it, but you know, just trying to do the right thing. And you know,
Well, Steve, believe it or not, I think in this world, and I'm being very optimistic of the 236 million people that inhabit the United States and the 8 million people 8 billion people that inhabit the world that we live in. I think there's a lot more people that share our sentiments that we don't understand. The taking of life for property, for capital gains based on your religion, the color of your skin. I actually thought that, when I came to the 60s, that I would not have to have a conversation with my kid about race relations. I thought when I created my podcast that this subject would not be paramount to the conversation we're having. And I wish one day that our children won't have to have this conversation,
yeah,
that we will exist as the great nation we are, as one people under
yeah,
God. And that's what I'm hoping. I don't understand it. I think it needs to change. I think movies such as the Roberto Clemente story will be one of the ties that bind. I think this interview between you and I didn't know you were Jewish. I just knew you're a great person. So, you know, I tell people all the time is that, what happened to Dr. King when he had I had a dream speech, there was a representation of every single race there. And I think the biggest fear that this country has is us coming together, wanting peace and demanding peace, and for us to come together. I think once we start fighting as one, we can no longer be divided. And some of these issues, not all of them, will eventually go away. And I hope this story of the Clemente story um, will be the first stepping stone to saying that um, a man gave of himself without asking for anything in return. He played the game of baseball for the enjoyment of playing the game of baseball. He gave himself and his talents to the fans that enjoyed the game of baseball.
yeah,
And he celebrated the fact that the game of baseball gave him a platform that will provide freedom in this country for his story to be told.
yeah.
And I thank you for what you have done. And any of the actors or participants going to be at this debut? Just curious.
Roberto Clemente's going to be there, Junior, um, and the we're trying to get Steve Blass, who was a pitcher for the '71 Pirates. They won the World Series. Clemente was the MVP that year. We're not sure. These guys are getting older, whether he can travel. The director, producer, the Clemente Museum will be there, and some other uh, relatives of ex-players that knew Roberto Clemente. So it'd be nice to. And Carol Bass, to me, she's a celebrity, even though you never heard of her because, um, you know, a white girl that meets uh, a black Puerto Rican in 1969 and become friends for life, 50 years. You know, that's what I like to hear. And
Yep.
so I'm
Yep.
looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing the opinion of the people that see it. It was at South by Southwest. It did get good reviews, and it won an award for the award for I guess they poll people as they're coming out of the movies, and
Okay.
won an audience award. So it's a good story. I mean, maybe streamers would rather deal, I think, sometimes with murder and ugly things and
Not
um
at RMK Productions. I just want to tell you, I'm going to share with you. a secret, and I'm going to ask you, please don't tell, but we own a Hulu channel, and that we are going to be streaming positive content on our channel. We have one of the largest stars in Bali that's going to be coming our way, and they're going to give us their library in order to allow people in this country to see some of the films that are being made. And I'm hoping with the film company in Boston that a lot of the filmmakers that are of color are going to be doing the same thing. So we're providing an opportunity. So not all streamers are looking just to make a quick profit by shoot 'em up, gang, and the stereotypes. But these are stories. And the reason why we're doing this interview, because the story has to be told. We
Mhm.
have to keep these stories alive and pass on to our kids,
Yeah.
because one of the things about being a kid is that you have your dreams. And
Yeah.
the other thing is we have our heroes. And sometimes meeting our heroes is not exactly the best thing, but when you have people like Roberto Clemente that gave his life giving back, when you have people such as yourself that are giving back, that have established themselves in the community as a good human being, and you've always been kind, you're giving back. These are the people and these are the stories that need to be told. That's the reason why we're highlighting, this story. And I hope that people that get a chance to watch this share the story, sit back and remember the story. And I'm going to ask you a quick question because, I try to do my homework, but one, how do we get one of those 21 t-shirts? Because I see you keep turning your shoulder, the number 21, which happens to be his number. But I'm going to ask you, do
Yeah.
you know how that number came about? Why he was so attached to 21?
He was originally issued number 13,
Correct.
but he ended up with 21. I don't know if he uh uh tried to get that number or he just was his number, but it means everything to so many people and
It meant
especially in
everything.
Pittsburgh.
It meant everything to him because his mother's last name was Walker, and
Yes.
putting together Roberto Clemente and the middle name Walker attached to it totaled out in the letters to 21.
Yeah.
And that's why he wanted it. And lucky for him, when he got to the Pirates, someone had the 21 number,
Oh, I
but
didn't know that story.
they traded it out afterwards. And so
Yeah.
he took the number and never gave it back.
Yeah. He
So
ended up with exactly 3,000 hits, which we discussed that in the movie. You know, exactly 3,000. So,
yeah,
and he had three sons and he played at three River stadiums. So, um, another coincidence. But thank you for having me, Kevin. I mean, this is delightful and always willing to talk about Clementi because he was definitely a big impact in my life.
all right. Well, the fact that you've had your hand in the glove of a sports hero, one of my heroes, legend. I've cried twice over two people I had never met. Walter Payton happened to be one. My
Mm.
family witnessed when the announcement when we saw um, hit the and read the story on the 6 o'clock news that he had died. Um, I've written many times, written past places in New York and saw his name, spray painted on the side of a walk. And
Yeah.
remembering in Pittsburgh, you still can drive down the highway and graffiti artists are still painting his name on the sides of bridges and everything else. I
Yeah.
don't think his name should ever be forgotten. I hope that this um, interview and your story, the documentary, immortalizes him into our hearts and minds, that we never forget that this was a baseball player. He didn't make millions of dollars like everyone else did. I
Mm.
believe his first contract when he signed was $4,000 to play for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but he was very generous. He was very kind. He
Yeah.
brought people together, even though there was a language barrier, and he overcame the adversities of people not accepting him for just because of the color of his skin, but he let
Right.
his baseball bat and the way he played and interacted with his teammates speak for themselves. And
Yeah.
because you're telling that story, I'm glad that his story will never die because now you just immortalized him along with the collection that you've owned, along with the space that he and his family and this story, well, is reserved in your heart. And I thank you for bringing this story to my podcast. I thank you 1,000 times over. I thank you. So, Steve,
Very welcome, Kevin.
if you had one thing you wanted the listeners to take away from your experience, Roberto Clemente, your experience with producing this film, your experience with the message as far as life is concerned, what would you want the people that are listening to this podcast to take away?
Well, I have to go back to if someone asks for your help and you don't help them, you're wasting your time on this earth. And, you know, uh, that's just, you know, so important to me. So just helping. I mean, it makes you feel better. Um, and it's so important. And, um, you know, that's the most important thing to me. He taught me to help other people.
And I appreciate that lesson. And to our listeners, I appreciate our loyal fans and our listeners. And I do hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking with WIT Kevin and Son. And if you like what you've heard, I've asked you to, share, make your comments. But when you follow, just remember this, my select group of friends that follow are people that have a high call to action. Steve's one of these people. They don't drive by accident. They stop and they help. They make a difference. So if you're one of those people, go ahead and follow and subscribe. If you like this story, go ahead and share. If you'd like to be a guest, go to RMK Productions.org and get in touch with us. We'll be more than happy to talk to you. I always struggle with the ending because when you have stories like this, you never want them to end. But my grandfather always said, similar to what you've been taught, he says, when you get to a place in life that you can help someone else out, it is your duty to do so. He
Mhm.
said, preach one, teach one. And with that said, we'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you, Mr. Steve Burman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Happy to be there.